My focus was on conscious leadership, how corporates are developed and designed from a strategic perspective, and then specifically looking at leadership and leadership styles, because I believe any person has got the capacity to be a leader.
When you talk about sacred workspaces, what are you referring to?
Meet a person as a soul and not just as another worker. And when a group of souls get together, they can create magic.
What is consciousness? Welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Dan Shaw. Thanks so much for being with us here today. I have an amazing guest with me, Dr. Marinus Uys, who is a PhD recent graduate.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In applied psychology.
Yeah.
And your main focus is industrial psychology.
Yeah. So my focus was on conscious leadership within my research, but you're 100% correct. And the focus really is, I'm not a practicing psychologist because I focus on coaching more than I do on the normal clinical side of things. And I'm more focused on what's called industrial psychology. So that's more business things and working with corporate clients.
Okay, so industrial psychology, did it get its name from being more industry-led?
Yeah, so it kind of stemmed from clinical psychology. So although I studied both, I focused on more corporates. So when they said in the 80s, they said we have to differentiate psychology in the business and psychology in individuals. So they always were going hand in hand, but these days you specialize in one of those two fields. And that's why I also chose to go into corporates more than individual, although I'm qualified in both. Yeah.
And for someone who doesn't know much about it, i.e. me, how do you differentiate between human resources versus industrial psychology?
It's pretty much the same thing. Companies these days have got weird and wonderful things to name it. So my full description of what I do is called human capital development. So it's a subsection within that larger fields. Some companies, it's part of HR. Some companies, it's part of learning and development or human capital development. But it's pretty much for a layman, it boils down to HR. Everybody hopefully knows a bit about HR. But we've come a long way, and that seems to be the route that we are going towards. It's more very specialized fields within HR.
So what kind of industries have you been involved with? And what does it look like when you go in to look at the structure of the company and the different hierarchies, and what is human development actually?
So the first part of the question, I've now celebrated my 20 years within this field. So it's been a long route. I've worked in telecommunications, the financial sectors, the bit of a dab into retail work, while always simultaneously focusing on individual growth or individual coaching or counseling in that regard. So that always went hand in hand. And the last couple of years, I've decided to specialize and say, I want to go into how corporates are developed and designed from a strategic perspective, and then specifically looking at leadership and leadership styles, because I believe any person has got the capacity to be a leader, no matter what their personality type, no matter what type of person they are, or in what work or whatever they do, they can become leaders. And that really is my passion and where the zone in on it is. The second part of the question
was around human development, or what did you call it? Human capital
development.
Excuse me.
So human capital or human capacity development is all around the focus on how do you take a person from A to Z and assisting them to really live out their best lives. There's a lot of components to it. As you can imagine, a person is not just one-dimensional, and they're quite complex individuals. So the science around it is to understand where the person currently is at, and that's normally done through personality assessments or various tests that people do, and then seeing how you can best assist that personality type to grow into a better version of themselves. So in a normal counseling environment or sessions or coaching even, it goes to focus on where is the person at and where do they want to go. That to me seems to be the best possible route. In a corporate setting, it follows the exact same route to say, where's the individual currently? How do we make sure that they are best at what they do while simultaneously also making money and seeing if they're the right fit in the company?
What do you think the biggest misconceptions are around the work that you do?
People think with the moment the word psychology comes in, they're like, oh, you're going to analyze me. You're going to now analyze my thoughts or that kind of regards. Or that's what I think. And the second part of it is around what value do we really bring to the office and what has that got to do with my business? Those, I think, are the two major ones.
And why would somebody need an industrial psychologist to come in? Let's say you have a mine, for instance.
Yeah.
That's got everyone from the people who are going underground to the people who are developing the layout for the structure and how to bring out these elements. And then everything in between. Do you only focus on the higher leadership roles, or do you also work with lower down in the hierarchy?
So I work with everybody. So right through from, in that case scenario, the miner and underground, right through to the actual leadership. As you can imagine, there's different needs in different companies. And in that scenario, the miner different below the ground that needs to do the actual hard work might have a different need, but they still have specific growth opportunities. It might be around health and wellness. It might be around something like how do we mine better, as an example. Whereas the top level, on the strategic leadership level, it might be how do we become better people leaders, or how do we better focus on making sure that individuals grow within the company, and how best to be a good manager. So it really is for everybody. It's not just a specific field. And once again, it brings me back to the idea that all of us can have the opportunity to be leaders. We don't have to, even if it doesn't feel or you fit in that traditional idea of being a leader, anybody has got the opportunity to do so. Yeah.
What is consciousness?
I wish I could give you a straightforward answer. I think even after my PhD and having done extensive research on it, I'm still not 100% sure of what the answer is. I wish I did know. For me personally, it's around your ability to focus on something, and that awareness that you're placing on that focusing is in the basic form all about consciousness. On a more bigger or larger scale, consciousness has to do with how we perceive things, how we experience things. And that's where the interesting side of the spiritual things come in, is to see who is this person that then observes me and you sitting here and chatting? Is it myself? Is it my brain? Is there another part in that? So yeah, I wish I could give you like a straightforward answer to that. But I can't. The more I know, the less I think I know. Something like that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But basically, it's just being present and aware.
I think so. So a lot of words are thrown around these days of mindfulness, doing something mindful and being aware of your surroundings. So we talk about a certain intelligence that's involved there. So whether it's a social intelligence or a political intelligence, and that to me is around the awareness or the consciousness about it. But it is very, very difficult to define. And the more science progress, the even more difficult it has become to really pinpoint and say, okay, we know exactly what it is. And there's some really interesting research, specifically in the parapsychology fields or the far left, I call it, that really goes way out to say, how do we define this and how do we put together a definition of it? I'm sorry I can't give you like an exact answer.
No, I was asking because I want to break down the different wording that you use. So you've got conscious leadership. So we have defined consciousness very basically to say that it's awareness and presence, being present, so that you can look at things as they are and not how you perceive them to be based on your own programming.
Yeah.
But then in terms of leadership, do you feel that there's not enough consciousness around leadership?
Yeah, don't believe there is enough consciousness around leadership. The research is not new. So this comes also from the 80s, where people really deep dive into saying, what does it mean to be a conscious leader? So to summarize that specifically for you, there's a lot of touch points or specific aspects to it. So for example, I'm a good people person. I'm able to acknowledge my surroundings. I'm able to make money for the company. I'm able to live a balanced lifestyle. I'm able to perceive things from a conscious spiritual perspective and still make money for the company ultimately. So conscious leadership is definitely not new, but I think as the world is turning, we're going to need more conscious leaders. Whether you're a business owner or whether you're an individual, it's going to become very, very important. We've seen through COVID how people have scrambled and they were unsure what to do. Obviously, it's a massive pandemic and nobody saw it coming. But that kind of pushed me to say, okay, what does this mean to be a conscious leader? And how do people apply that actual thing into their lives? Yeah.
Do you feel that there's quite a lot of resistance from certain generations, or do you feel like there's actually an openness within companies? So say a director says, I need you in my company because I feel like we're moving into a new space in time. And then you've got obviously a lot of leaders with under them or under them.
Yeah.
That, do you feel like there's generational resistance, or do you feel like everyone's open?
Look, I don't think it has necessarily a generational thing. That's a very good question and observation, but I don't think there's necessarily a generational gap. We're talking these days about Generation T, which stands for transformation, and that's currently where we're at, and that's a collective understanding of where we are at. So there's resistance in all the groups, the younger people or the older people. It literally goes around how conscious that person is into the business. So I don't think we can pinpoint and say that there's older groups. Logic would say to me, older people are a bit more resistant to it, but that's really not the case. I found throughout organizations and working with individuals, they are open to the idea and they're starting to move into that direction.
That's very cool. Someone else I had on my podcast, he's a doctor, he's an implantationist, and he was telling me to read a book called Black Box Thinking. Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's all around embracing failure and how in the medical industry, it's not really something that is encouraged because one, you can get sued, and two, your ego is the size of China. So you can't admit that you made a fault. It's the patient's problem because maybe they had thin blood or it was just a mishap. Whereas the black box, which is in an airplane, no matter if that airplane explodes or there's a huge crash and it's under the ocean, if they are able to find it, it can tell them all the data from the pilot and the plane so that they can learn from the mistakes that they made.
Yep.
So the aeronautical industry embraced failure and embraced mistakes and learning from them and collecting data and doing that. So I think that's one of the things that lends into the work that you do in terms of embracing a culture of accountability. I made a mistake. This is an environment where it's okay to make mistakes. I feel like that makes you a more conscious leader if you are willing to also be vulnerable enough to say, guys, I'm also not perfect. I'm also a human. And these are the trajectories that we are trying to attain.
Yeah.
And it's also quite cool to have someone like you in an environment like this, because everything's always focused on KPIs and getting the work done.
Yeah.
But now you have different things to aspire to, like, for instance, more connectedness within the team.
Yes.
More accountability and openness. So I think my question to you is, what kind of tools do you use or training techniques when you're doing that kind of work with teams or team building? How does your team building differentiate from typical team building that's out there?
Yeah. So just a first remark on the black box. That's really such a cool idea. And that 100% filters into it. So from my world, we talk about psychological safety within teams. So psychological safety in teams means I can speak up when I need to. I can just be myself. I can, if something goes wrong, I can raise my hand and say, hey, sorry, I made a mistake, or sorry, this is not working properly. And interestingly enough, psychological safety research was done within the medical field. And the research that they done was when an operation happens and nurses stand around the doctor, they were wanting to know in that critical moment, why do some people not speak up? Like if you can see something is going wrong, why are you not saying, hey, hold on, you're doing something wrong here. I might be the nurse, but you might be the expert or the ego the size of China, but you're making a mistake here. And I know because I've got X or Y experience. And that concept has to do with psychological safety. So how do we as a group of people pitch up with one another to allow that vulnerability and allow that openness to say, I made a mistake, please, or sorry, you'll make a mistake, even giving feedback to someone. And on the flip side, being open enough to say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, can we relook at it, or whatever the case is. And you can imagine in that high pressure moments, there's no time to kumbaya and hold hands and think about it. It happens within split seconds when the decisions are made to be psychologically safe or not. So when I work with teams and I work with in retreats or offsites, or I'm brought in to specifically deal with them, it boils down to psychological safety. So how does the leader show up for the individuals? But at the same token, are we as a group or team allowing that vulnerability or that openness to really perform better? Yes, KPIs is important. It's critical. Making money, also critical, but you need to do it in a way that everybody feels welcomed and able to raise their voice. So when I work with teams, specifically offsites or retreats, I use a tool called Enneagram. It's a very specific personality type of test. It just works for me. There's hundreds out there. And I really delve into what are the personality types within the team, what's missing, and what we should specifically focus on. So that's the one thing that stands out. The second thing that I bring in is I've got a huge passion for metaphysical stuff. So I bring in a lot of metaphysical aspects. And I think that combination of metaphysics and science, not that there's not science in metaphysics, but bringing those two together in teamwork, I think is pretty unique. And it's a great experience for individuals when they attend a offsite or just normal teamwork.
Can you speak a little bit more on what metaphysical means?
So metaphysical are those things that we normally can't necessarily explain. So it's sometimes called spiritual aspects or spiritual understandings. I've got a huge passion and interest for businesses that understand that there's a spiritual component to each human. And that spiritual component, if we bring that in and weave that into the business, we create spaces that are just amazing. I honestly believe that no matter what you're doing, if you can do it with a certain sense of purpose, you are much happier. If you understand why you are doing certain things within a business, it just makes the world amazing. And I always get asked the question, so why focus on that? I've got the scientific proof from my research to show you make more money. That's the bottom line. If you can conscious and spiritually bring that into your business, guaranteed you will make more money. And normally it was seen as a kumbaya thing, right? So in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was seen as, oh, we don't want to do another kumbaya. And now we've kind of proven you need a kumbaya. So, yeah.
What kind of practices are you implementing that focus more on the kumbaya?
So I get huge stays when I bring in meditation into meetings. Or if I say a moment of sacred silence where we don't respond. You know, normally meetings are very highly driven and people just talk, and there's a lot of psychology that goes into just a normal everyday meeting. So imagine if this weird dude walks in and say, you need a minute of silence before you start a meeting. So that's a prime example of a very sacred way of addressing one another. Another one is we don't shout and we don't scream at one another. To have that rule brought into it sounds simple, but it makes a massive change in people's lives because you get a lot of bullies at work. Yeah.
Yes, and also it's that thing of creating safety.
Absolutely.
Because if I know for a fact that you've promised that you are going to adhere to that rule, then I'm much safer to tell you my truth.
Absolutely, and committed to the end goal, right? So if you've got a business and you've got a team of people working towards that goal, it's bringing all those people together and saying, this is the goal. It's okay to make mistakes. It shouldn't happen often, but we learn from it, right? That boils down to the psychological safety on why we are implementing that. So back on the metaphysical side of things, so meditation, bringing in certain things like how do we do rituals within our meetings, or how do we conduct business? Do we have certain rituals? And when I say rituals, people say, I normally go magic kind of stuff. And absolutely, if there's certain rituals that you as a team can create, bringing you together, it creates beautiful magic moments.
Do you have certain criteria for if someone says they want to come and work with you?
Yeah.
Do you have criteria that they have to match in order to do so? Like, for instance, how open are you to actually changing? Because I don't want to come in there for 3 months and knock my head against a wall because you tell me that meditation is bullshit. So there has to be a willingness also from those people.
Yeah, so definitely. So I have in both my individual practice as well as my corporate clients, I've got what I call exploring conversations. So it's a consultation where we both determine, because it's a two-way street, right? Whether we, number one, vibe. So if we check the vibe and we like one another, and both for corporate and individuals. And secondly is not really necessarily a criteria, but more on a sense of a visceral feeling of, can I work with this person? I just had this week a client that I worked for quite extensively, a corporate client, which I unfortunately had to stop the contract because it wasn't working. And it wasn't working because of the person not being open to change or suggestions. But at the same time, also, there was other agendas. A lot of time people are not honest when they bring in the people to say, come and help our team. Some political stuff that goes on, political meaning the dramas that happen at the office. And same for individuals. Sometimes people have got good intentions and they want to change and they have a feeling they might change. But when they start working with someone, it becomes quite clear that that's not the intention. So it's all about the vibe and the intention. Yeah.
But that also makes me think that, once again, people might be open. Like, let's say it's a general manager. In the beginning, it sounds groovy to have a more connected team.
Yeah.
But then when you're told that you're part of the problem, then it becomes more difficult to accept that information, especially if control is your mechanism of operating.
Yeah, it happens 8 out of 10 times, right? Because people leave bad managers. They don't leave a bad job. And so when we are brought in, normally we have to have, meaning I have to have that tough conversation with the manager and say, you're the problem. It's not your team. Or it could be the flip side. Sometimes people gang up and they victimize their manager or their leader. That happens also often. And the third thing is sometimes there's just very bad toxic environments. Nothing to do with the business. It's just a very crappy business environment, and that also contributes towards it. So when we are brought in and I go into places, we definitely check that, and we check under which grid does it fall. And those crucial conversations happen more often than not, meaning pulling that manager or person or leader aside and say, look, you're the problem. We've listened to everybody, and it's easier because we come from an external point of view and we're objectively able to look at things. Sometimes when you in the crux of a business, you can't see the wood from the trees. So you kind of need someone to say, hey, is it me or is it someone else? And 100% correct. If it's a closed person, not open to change, not that that's a criteria for not being a good leader, but yeah, it could definitely indicate it.
So you talked about the spiritual side of every human being, and that a leader needs to acknowledge that spiritual side of someone. That can, one, be taken in a way that you need to acknowledge their religious belief systems, which is a part of that.
Yeah.
But how do you draw a line in the sand, so to speak? Because it's easier just to ignore that stuff, and you come to work, I pay you to do a job, you do that job. But you're saying that there's far more productivity and money to be made when there's a collective uplifting in the energetic field, basically, because people are lighter, people feel seen and acknowledged. But how do you then create a boundary or the line in the sand, as I said, between we are now spiritual beings who see each other and, everything's enlightened and great versus I'm telling you to do something and I need it done the way I need it done.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that line can get blurred if there's too much intimacy in that space.
Yeah.
So how do you draw a line?
Yeah, so that is such a cool question. I'm going to go back to the kumbaya moments, right? Kumbaya, funny enough, just to give you a short little background on that, actually means it comes from a slaving song in America. And the meaning of it is, come watch me. So meaning whatever you believe in, validate me or see me as a person. So that's where kumbaya comes from.
That's quite cool.
It's cool, right? So like, come and watch me or validate me or see me as a person, see me in my totality. And that links on to give you the answer is that it's not just the spiritual side of things. You can't just have a kumbaya moment and say, validate me and see me, because guess what? Business still needs to happen. If there's a leader or there's an entrepreneur or a person running a business, you still have got stuff to do. And to be able to be crystal clear around it is what this is all about. So in other words, if Dan says to me, I've got this business, this is what I want to reach, who's coming along with me? It's bringing those people along with you to say, this is my goal and this is what needs to happen. What happens on the sideline is either people are not buying into the full picture, so they're there for the money. They're not there to pull their full selves into the picture of it. And what happens is people have got this innate idea of, because it's a kumbaya moment, I can just do whatever I want. And it becomes excessively difficult for a leader to say, I just need this done. Like I don't need to validate you or see you, whatever. So it has to form a two-way street, meaning we have to create the environments already before anything is done so that when the tacky hits the tar, we need to know this is the focus and this is where we need to go into it. This is our sprint. This is our focus. There's no misunderstanding about that. So you can imagine if I'm brought in where it's already a problem, it's kind of complicated to unravel that or to say, how do we reestablish that? Not impossible to do, but very difficult. So, and I'm saying this with the premises, we can't have businesses unless you're an NGO or not making money, not focusing on money. You're there to make money. Otherwise, why are you as a group coming together to do certain things? So it's that understanding of certain tasks needs to be done, certain roles needs to be fulfilled where it's a leader and follower. And if that gets muddy, then we need to reestablish that and say, right, what's going on here? Do people not understand the goal? Do they not understand what needs to happen? So where do we draw the line? When a person's not doing it, that's the line. And having that tough conversations and crucial conversations to say, do you understand why you're here and why you're doing this?
So what I'm getting from the conversation is that it's more around acknowledging somebody's purpose in life and giving them more purpose than just an 8-to-5 that's paying their bills, so that they can actually come to work and feel like they're a part of a bigger system. So it's actually creating a picture and then nurturing that person's potential within their role or another role that they could move into and recognizing what that looks like.
Absolutely.
So it's not so much around their own personal spiritual life. Because for one, when I feel like WhatsApp has made things very personal, which I don't always love because I'm like, there's really no line in the sand. I'm asking my Vodacom rep to give me my invoice, and he's telling me, oh, he forgot his dad died. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry that your dad died. I really am. But like that doesn't have anything to do with my invoice. And the only reason he feels that he can tell me that is because I'm texting him on WhatsApp. So there's like this personal relationship, even though I've only seen him in person 3 times, and it's always been in a very professional environment. So yeah, I feel like those lines can get very blurred when you're trying to be a leader, but you also like nurturing someone too much to a point where they stop doing the work that they need to be doing because they know that you have empathy for them. So there really is this balancing act that needs to go on. But I actually like what you were saying, is that in a corporate environment, it needs to be, I acknowledge and see you, but on a professional capacity, instead of, you know, what your spiritual life needs from you. Because just now you're going to be coming to me and saying, I need a 6-week holiday to go and pray to, you know, whatever. It's like, okay, wait, hold on. I wanted to get involved, but now I don't.
Yeah, exactly. So. And I believe, I think there was this great book written by Melanie Klein. And she, if I recall the title correctly, it's When Psychopaths Go to Work. And it's such a cool title because it was based around, you know, people bring their dramas to work. And I think you're right, definitely technology is making it difficult. But at the same time, a lot of people have got so many agendas, meaning they're there to be liked. They're not there to do the job. So, and that's where the office politics starts, right? It starts at that moment that for themselves, that line is unclear. Then they go in and they misuse the system, and to their own detriment, of course, because then it's not going to work for the leader and it's not going to look for the follower. On a more individual perspective, the moment you have to kind of decide, am I there to get likes or am I there to do a job? And of course I'm empathetic. If a person says to me, hey, my dad died, I'm not going to be an asshole and say, oh, like, stuff it. I just, like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to be empathetic.
But the job still needs to get done,
I still need this. Yeah, you know, like you answered the WhatsApp. So can we at least get an agreement that we can get this thing done in the most possible gentle way? If a person is totally incapacitated and can't answer their phone because their father passed away, of course I'm not going to pressure them. You know what I mean? That's fine details of it. So I also believe it's just a two-way street, and I believe sometimes people misuse the system. They misuse that relationships, and they misuse social media specifically, and not just social media, but any way of communication, because guess what? You don't have to see my face or anything. I'm just going to use your poor rape as an example. So to say, oh, it's her again, you know, doesn't she know my dad passed away? No, she clearly is just asking for something.
But I don't think that's my point, is it's not my business.
It's not your business, exactly.
When my clients say, hi, checking in where my package is, I'm not like, sorry, my partner broke up with me, so I haven't been able to check. I mean, like they don't care about that, and I don't expect them to.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's not the nature of the relationship.
Yeah, and you're not, and they, in that scenario, psychological safety has got nothing to do with it. It's a moment of a transaction.
He's not my employee. Yes.
You know what I mean? So, and even if it was your employee, it would have still been the same scenario, right? Because so we can do, so it's that specific details of it. And I think the misusing of that block or hiding behind technology is really becoming a problem. The same with WhatsApp emoticons. I can't tell these days if someone, because if, I don't know about you, but if I get a person and I don't like them, I lol and I give a smiley face or a thumbs up, that's not how I'm feeling about the situation. And that's also dumbing us down massively.
What do you think about the theory of hire quick and fire quick, and about rotten eggs in companies and how they can really, like one rotten egg can spoil the whole batch? Yeah,
so there's some good solid science behind it. One person just with a bad attitude can totally derail the fabric of your teamwork that you've built up for years. So there's not even second guessing for me. And I don't believe people deliberately do that. Nobody goes to a job and say, today I'm going to really stuff it up. You know, like I'm going to stuff up this team. But it happens through stupid things. I'm gossiping at the coffee counter, or I'm sending a WhatsApp after saying, hey, did you see what Dan did yesterday? Blah, 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 blah. That breaks down the fabric of it. So 100% get rid of that person as soon as possible. It's like you're wasting your time to think, I'm going to solve this through whatever. One person, I've seen it so many times, massive implications. Apologies, massive implications for a team. Not deliberately, but it happens so many times. So hire fire very quickly. Don't hang on to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you encourage companies to set up roles from a conscious perspective? So not just hiring someone based off of their credentials, but also like being aware of different human what is that called?
Capacities or...
there's another word for it. Soft skills. Like someone's emotional intelligence, their ability to regulate themselves, the energy that they bring into the team. You know, if you have someone positive, as bad as a rotten egg with a bad attitude is, someone positive with a great attitude and a can-do attitude can really also influence a whole team.
Absolutely, but they would still be able to have the capacity to either learn to do the job or be able to do the job already.
Yes.
So, you know, we don't talk about soft skills anymore because it's such a huge part of business and such a huge part of any company, really. Like you can imagine, just emotional intelligence or awareness of your situation. It's almost like a given, right, these days in roles. Well, we hope it is. So, when we talk about conscious recruitment or how to bring people into the company, it's based all around how does the person show up? And sometimes people also interview excessively bad. I've had situations where I had to sit in with interviews specifically on C levels and CEO levels. And sometimes the CEOs aren't great talkers, but they've got great other skill sets, right? So in scenarios like that, we really have to go in deep and say, what can this person bring? And I think that's what you're referring to. So that consciously to say, will this person make a difference or will they actually break the company going forward? And it's not an easy thing. I think recruitment has got, the last few years exceptionally bad. And I don't really know why, but we've really seen a dip in the quality of recruitment. So if we can just get that right into saying, how do we recruit individuals and what are the things that we're looking for within our team?
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be definitely how a person smiles, how they, show up, how they dress, whatever the case may be.
But it's difficult to know. I mean, I've made quite a few errors in judgment, and I think I have quite a good judge of character, but GCM, that person starts and you're like, wild. This is not the same person that I interviewed multiple times, that has been here for 2 weeks, and now I'm seeing something different. Or the first 3 months was great, but 6 months down the line and they have a full-time contract, everyone's complaining about them. It's a problem. And then it's more difficult to fire people or get rid of them. Yeah. And that sounds harsh, but in an ecosystem, it's like imperative. You would rather pay that person 3 months' salary to get the hell out of there than to let it sabotage all your hard work.
Absolutely. And specifically for medium-sized companies or even small-sized companies, you don't really have the luxury to go out and, search into the world to the best candidate. You kind of get what you get, right? So I'm a huge fan of setting up contracts so that you can easily get out. South Africa has got one of the most toughest labor laws in that regard. So we really make it difficult for owners to get rid of people. So it's either a golden handshake or you need to set up a contract in such a way that you can easily navigate that. I hear that so many times of people coming into a business and they think, oh, this is an awesome person. Gosh, 6 months down the line, you're like, please, can you just do the work? So it happens quite often. And again, it's a two-way street. It's people understanding, am I here for the money? Am I here for a bigger purpose?
On the flip side of that, what advice could you offer to an individual seeking employment in a larger company? What are the things that they need to look out for to recognize conscious leadership and acknowledgement?
Yeah, sure. So It's such an important question. In South Africa, we unfortunately sit with a very high unemployment rate. So people are kind of desperate for work, right? We don't have the luxury to really pick and choose. But if we could get in a situation where we could look at people, it always amazes me in interviews that they would sometimes ask about the company culture, but they kind of rate that somewhere. They read on LinkedIn, that's what they need to ask, but they don't really listen to the answers. And by listening to the answers as a person that you are applying, listen carefully, making sure that the leader is open to suggestions, that a leader is confident in themselves, so they've got a good, solid personality, and also really nitpick what their leadership style is. Like directly ask them, where's your boundaries? What don't you like, kind of thing.
When there's conflict, how do you
handle it? Yeah. So because we are in such a situation at the moment we are in, specifically in South Africa, is that people are not asking those questions. They're just so glad that they're getting a job, that they're not asking the really tough questions. So my advice would be ask the tough questions, because you also want to be happy where you're at, right? Yeah.
When you talk about sacred workspaces, what are you referring to?
Yeah. So sacred workspaces is creating a space or an environment that understands individuals are souls. And when a group of souls get together, they can create magic. They can create that sacred space. So sacred spaces is all around understanding as a collective, we have got a certain responsibility, not just to ourselves, also to our environment, like the earth environment, also to our stakeholders, making money, and understanding that it's a larger picture, but we are ultimately souls. Meet a person as a soul and not just as another worker. That's what sacred spaces is all about. It is beautiful if it's done right. And meeting rooms become, without sounding corny, a place where people can recognize the idea of saying, we are more than just our work. We are a soul behind whatever needs to happen, and make your work soulful. Now,
that's really beautiful. What about your individual coaching with people who are aspiring to become leaders, or people who have multiple companies and are trying to compartmentalize everything so that there's more structure? How do your sessions work, and how do you navigate that with people?
So I've got a weird and interesting approach. And by weird, I mean I've got something pretty unique. So my first session is always that, checking the vibes, checking the connection, whether me and the person is going to get along over a period of time. The second interesting thing that I do is I limit the amount of sessions that I offer an individual. The maximum amount, including the first session, is 7 sessions. I figured out the sweet spot with that. Apologies. And the reason for it is, after 7 sessions, it becomes blurry. Then no one is clear on the goals. We start to transfer, called in psychology.
What is transferring?
So my issues become yours and your issues becomes mine, in its simplistic form. So then, or even if I have too many clients, then this similar thing can happen. I'm thinking, oh, but you said this, so it's similar to that of my client, so having those kind of issues come in. So I limit my clients. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it really goes on the individual and what they want to reach. Some people meet once a week because they've got a need to quickly go over certain things. Other people meet once a month. And it just depends on what they want to change and what they want to focus on. Some people are brilliant clients because they take on the work, they take on the responsibility, what's given to them, and they just run with it. And within 7 weeks, they can see massive changes. I do offer unique perspectives. I again bring in metaphysics. I bring in behavioral psychology, different views of psychology. So it's not just a normal coaching session. Like I said, I'm not a practicing psychologist because I don't want to do that, but I focus on bringing those principles into it.
And is it always around business and leadership, or do you also get involved with people's personal lives?
Yeah, so a lot of personal stuff. For some odd reason, a lot of people that come for my sessions sometimes also got very serious personal issues, like someone either wants to take their own life, or they So like very, very serious things. They feel that they don't want to follow the traditional psychological route and they want to work with someone from a different perspective. So absolutely looking at that full spectrum. So it's not just leadership and the normal aspects.
I wanted to ask around purpose alignment and with employees, if you are talking to an employee and you are helping them find their soul, purpose, or you said working with soul and finding their purpose within the work that they do rather than just a job. How do you assist them to find that deeper calling?
Sure. So I take them through a combination of processes. So by asking certain questions, like the coaching questions, right? So like I would say something around how do you spend your time or how do you spend your day? My generic one that I tend to fall back on a lot is I say, if you imagine your life as a bookshelf full of books, which books would you pull out first? And it could be any book. It could be spiritual books. It could be anything. And normally that's a very good conversation starter, because I would say choose the top 5 books and tell me why you've selected those books. Or similar thing to TV programs, like what's your favorite movie of all time? What resonated with that?
Is this to recognize what's important to them?
Absolutely. And then to unpack that a bit further into giving that. So through that, it's either that or I give them a very small assessment to say, what are your values and why is that important? Another combination is between the two is where I say, if you've selected a book or a movie, tell me how you recognize yourself as the main character. And that gets the conversation going to understand what's the values so that we can get to the purpose. I think there's a lot of overemphasis on purpose because I believe purpose changes frequently. Sometimes, I don't think everybody always has this idea. I certainly still don't know 100% this is what I have to do. But I feel good in doing certain things, right? Similar principle is used. So what do you feel currently are you called to do, or what speaks to you? And you can, when you engage with an individual, it's like lights going off. You can see they spark and their interest, and they would say, oh, I like this book because this character did X, Y, Z. And just through a set of few questions, we can get to what's your purpose and what's your value. And do you think that that's your purpose? I know that sounds very, very simplistic, and I've dumbed it down excessively, but that kind of helps on it. What's interesting around the purpose portions is that sometimes I work with individuals, and this is very, very difficult in companies where the ultimate process outcome is I'm not supposed to be this is not who I am. I'm not supposed to be in this company.
That's a great realization for the company and person, though.
100%. And even in certain teams, specifically when I work on team dynamics, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes there are individuals that say, look, this is not for me. I shouldn't be involved. I shouldn't be working because this is not where I cannot link my own values to this company's value. The thing is, companies always have got a value statement. So they've got a mission statement. And I really cringe when I see them, right? Because it's like always this dodgy stuff. And it's difficult for an individual to link to nonsense. But if people are truly living their value statements in the company, it is just unbelievable what can happen.
How do you shift a company that has old value statements that you can see have not been integrated into the company?
Yeah.
No one even knows what they mean because they're so far removed from it. How do you assist them to write new values that matter to them? And how do you integrate those values? Yeah,
so we've got what we call canvas sessions. So when I do a canvas session for a company or any size of company, is where it's normally a 2-day process where we unpack what are the true values and what are the true missions. Because a lot of the times, besides the things nobody knows what for goodness sake their statements mean, it's also sometimes used against them. I don't know if I can use specific examples.
It makes sense what you're saying.
Right. So in that regard, it's used against the company or the individuals, and we're saying we're not living out these values. So it's a 2-day process where we unpack what are the true values of the company, and we treat the company as an entity, as an actual what if the company was a person, and what would that person look like, and what would they value, what happens really in a case. So a lot of the times the values are there, KPIs are written, no one knows why the link is there. If you can get it right, there's a reason why it's there. It really works very, very good. But shouldn't be done just for the sake of doing it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But every company should have a value system.
It inherently does, right? Whether we verbalize it or not, it does have a value system. Like the place where we are today, I haven't seen any value statements as an example, but there is certain values that's inherent in the place.
Yes, if we had to sit here and write up one, there would be some
we could
key
come
indicators.
up with it, right?
Yeah. You obviously have spoken about why you believe that conscious leadership is important. And I think anyone who does business in this day and age, even understanding personal branding linked to businesses and how people are consuming things nowadays, it's very evident that people are looking for more conscious leaders in the world. We're all fed up with our governments. We're fed up with systems and corruption. We're fed up with companies that don't pay well or treat their employees badly, as consumers and as people who are seeking work. How do you see things looking in the future? So let's just talk about the next 5 years and then 10 years, because I think even 5 years and 10 years are going to be extremely different from one another.
Yeah.
I even heard Gary Vaynerchuk saying something very interesting to consider. He said, I think all of us are going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we don't take control of like social media posting now as a company, because right now is a short space in time where people's attention are on specific platforms, because soon it's going to be glasses that we walk around with that are integrated with our reality, and people are not going to be consuming social media in the same way that they do. So we're going to move into a new era.
Yeah.
And especially with AI, people buying robots to do jobs that they don't have to listen to employees complaining. The thing works all day.
Yep.
There's a lot of this coming into the space. So how do you see the conscious part of it integrating into the future? It's quite a broad question.
Yeah, no, but it's a good question. So if we just take a step back and understand that the amount of time that the amount of time it takes to implement change technologically wise is shortening. So let me give you an example. So it took from a buggy to the locomotive versus us flying into the moon, it's shortening every time. With the amount of people that we are sending up and spaceships and how quicker that moves, it's shortened every time something, because we learn from that, right? So, and it's not so far off. We're talking about AI, and I know that AI will have a massive impact on how we do our work. Whether that's good or bad, we can still debate it. Where consciousness comes in is to say, if I don't have to do the mundane stuff anymore, so if I don't have to do the daily schlep tasks that a machine can do for me, what would I then do with my time? Would I change jobs completely? What would that specifically look like? So Brené Brown specifically coined the term to say Generation T. We are literally in transformation phase. So I think we're going to, in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say we had this opportunity that you spoke about, and we are now the individuals collectively to say what needs to happen for us to move forward into this. I see, for example, the inequality in the women versus men within business starting to shift very, very quickly, meaning more women are now able to step up very easily into CEO roles. That would have not been possible 20, 30 years ago. Gaps in the pay market is closing quite quickly, and the way how we do work is completely changing. So to give you an example, what's currently very top of mind for people is working from home. So a lot of companies are battling with this idea of, why do we even have a building? Should we invite people back? or just force people to come back, etc. We don't have the answers yet. We don't know what works and what doesn't work. But what I can tell you is that it's changing so quickly. I don't think leaders have got the mental capacity to grasp fully what is busy happening because it's moving at such a good space. No one is just taking a breather and saying, okay, what does this mean? Like, we all kind of heard about AI. AI has been around for some time. It's only through the latest developments, through the chatbots, that it's now become a bit more popular. But there's AI in everything, from the ways that takes you to the office or medical equipment, etc. So it's not a new thing. And it's going to take some serious questions from a conscious perspective to say, how do we implement consciousness back into artificial intelligence, as an example? How do we use that? So if we don't have to do the mundane stuff. So how I view the picture in conscious and how it can change is to say, if we take the stuff away and we just have to reconnect as individuals on a soul level, what would that look like and what would that mean? And that's exciting stuff. So I think the future is going to be very, very interesting, and it's going to be sooner than anybody is going to expect. Yeah.
What is your dream for the work that you do?
More research to be done in it, specifically in the field of conscious leadership and conscious teams and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was part of my studies as well. Is we desperately need solid more research on consciousness and how it can be implemented. A lot of consciousness questions are being answered in other fields, and I think there's going to come a time where we have to integrate that into reality. I'm going to give you a prime example. Like in CERN in Switzerland, they're doing research on black holes and those kind of details, and one of the scientists deliberately spoken about consciousness in their work that they're doing. So taking those things and applying it back into the workplace, that's what's needed. That's also my hope. I hope we can get some solid research into it.
That's more on a broad scale that you're discussing that. But when I ask you what your dreams specifically, I mean as an individual.
As a person.
What do you hope to grow into?
Yeah.
When you look at 10 years from now, your ideal position, role, place in society, what does that look like?
Got you. So I would love to be in a situation where I can pick and choose which clients, ideally. And at the same token, in 10 years' time, I wish to have a couple of books published to make sure that I embed what I've found in my research and that it's implemented within a lot of organizations, that there's a lot of change and realness into my research and how that is implemented. So that really is my goal for the next 10 years.
And what about collaborations on your side? What kind of other fields would you bring into the work that you're doing from a collaborative perspective on things that you're curious in finding within the work that you do?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
So I'm so open to that and so excited about that specific idea, is really working with individuals from a diverse backgrounds to say, how do we bring those two things together? Just because I have a personal passion for metaphysics doesn't mean that's the only thing. It could literally be anything. I'm currently working with two different people in completely different fields where we're doing research from a scientific base and to publish research papers. That's what you kind of do after your PhD, is to publish findings with other individuals. So the opportunity is quite big there, and I don't want to pinpoint it exactly, but yeah, it's almost a must.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to speak about? You can take a few moments to think about it.
I feel we haven't spoken about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, so let's go there.
So there's been a bit of a flack in the last few months for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a bit concerned over that. I do hope that there's a shift again on the focus to understand that diversity is not just a color thing, it's a whole range of things. And my research has also proven that the more diverse a group of people are, the better they are performing. So if you can find your tribe, that is completely different from you as a person, that can give you a different perspective without losing the line of sight of the end goal you have got gold. So yes, I do believe we should always choose the best possible person for a position as an example, but we have to take into context that we don't live in isolation. We live in a world that is vastly unequal. I'm just going to I don't want to go into the color thing, but I want to talk about male, female as an example. There are more male executives in the world than female. We have to readdress that problem. We can't just sit aside and say, oh, it's okay, we're going to choose the best person. Yes, choose the best person from a group of females as an example. And I can't think of any other way how we can address that.
But why is it posed as a problem?
It's because it's doing exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing. So let me give you an example. If it's taking away, for example, for females to have the opportunity to apply.
Is that true though?
I think so.
Okay.
So if we don't create an equal playing field, if there is a female that doesn't want to have kids, that just wants to focus on her career and be the best possible CEO, if we don't create open playing fields, we inherently taking away the opportunity for her to apply to become a CEO, because we then stereotype and say, oh, but she's a woman, she should look after her kids.
Okay, but what if the application was open to females and males? They considered the applicants, but they chose a male anyway because that's what's right for their ethos and their company. I don't see a problem in that.
No, 100%.
Why should they have to just pick from women?
No, definitely not. So the best candidate and the best candidate for the situation should also be chosen. So if a company has reached what their quotas, or they reach their goals, what they want to do with diversity, absolutely. But if it's not the case, they should seriously look and say, is there no other candidate within that specific description we need to fulfill that need on the team? So I hear where you're coming from, and that's a very good point. It should always be the best candidate as long as it was an open playing field, right? That's the key critical. And at the moment, it's not an open playing field. There's a lot of biases that happen. Let's take another example. People of disabilities have got inherently, proven scientifically, less chance of getting a proper job because just of the fact that they are disabled. Like, hello, that doesn't make sense. No.
But it also does, because if you own a business and you're going to give that salary to someone, and this is no disrespect to anyone, but I would rather have an able-bodied person working for me because they can do a multitude of diverse things easily, rather than somebody who was less capable. Yeah,
100%. So, and in our world, we call it inherent discrimination. So it sounds bad, but it's not. So inherent discrimination just means, depending on the job, there's certain people that can and can't do the job. Like an old famous example that is used is an air stewardess. They can't employ an air stewardess that is pregnant. It's going to be detrimental to the baby. She can't fly. It's not going to, so that's part of, it's inherently discriminating. In your shop, as an example, the inherent discrimination is, I need someone to lift a box. They must be physically able to do a box. Different story, right? What we're talking about here is open playing fields.
Okay.
So that in your shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And that's actually a very, very good question, because equity is misunderstood. So if there's this old, very famous picture of a bunch of kids that are looking across a fence, and they've got different heights. Equity means that we're all able to stand on something so that we all can have a view to say what is beyond the fence. The same, if you use in practical side of business, to say how do we create an open playing field for anybody so that they have got a fair chance to actually get the opportunity should it arise. So if we go back to a person of disability, if it's not inherently discriminating and you can employ a disabled person, they should have an equal field to apply for the job and stand an opportunity to be the best candidate. Same for females, same for males. And I think what I'm worried about is the world is moving away from that criteria because of we're almost going back. It feels like we're going back in certain countries.
It is interesting what you said about diversity and how bringing so many different people from different cultures and backgrounds can bring in a totally new perspective. Because if you only have people who look like you and talk like you, there's a certain narrative that will always string through the rest of the business. Whereas if you have somebody else who goes, sorry, that's not my truth, and another person that says, and that's not my truth, so then we need to figure out a different way to come to a consensus. But that can also cause a lot of trouble in a business, no?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's not easy to employ someone that's got a different view of you, because we're born that way. We psychologically made up to say, I will engage with people like me. That's totally normal, and that's how things are done. If you are able to do it completely opposite and say, let me bring in someone that doesn't view the things because it's my truth and your truth, and then there is their truth. So if you can have those different views to say, I can challenge you, or I can give you a completely different view, it allows you the economical opportunity that wouldn't have been there with people that are just like you, that just focuses like you.
So seeing it as a unique opportunity to actually grow in perspective in terms of how your company runs.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Okay, well, for me, I feel like we've touched on a lot of topics today, and I'm grateful for your time with me today. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we go?
No, I just want to say thank you, Dan, for having me. It was such fun.
Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time with us. As usual, please give us a subscribe to support the channel, as well as leave us a comment if you have a question for Marinus or myself. And let me know if you have anyone else in mind that you'd like to see on the podcast next. Marinus, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you,
How
Dan.
can people get a hold of you if they want to?
I'm going to leave my contact details with you, then we can post it if that's okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank
Till next
you.
time.